So imagine going on 3, like, absolutely perfect dates.
Oh, setting the scene. I like it.
Right. And you know the exact kind I mean. You're laughing at the same really obscure jokes.
The conversation is just flowing effortlessly.
Effortlessly. For hours. The chemistry is electric. And you leave that third date feeling this undeniable rush of hope.
Which is rare these days.
Exactly. So you get home and you send a quick, had an amazing time tonight text.
Standard protocol.
And then absolute silence.
Oh.
Not just for a day either, for a week, for a whole month.
It's agonizing.
It really is. You're checking your phone compulsively. You start to wonder, like, did they lose their phone? Did they have a family emergency? Or God forbid, did they step into traffic?
You'll invent any scenario other than the obvious one.
Literally anything. You start questioning your own sanity. You're replaying every single sentence you uttered on that date, just searching for the fatal flaw.
Right. Trying to figure out what you did wrong.
Yeah. And then a month later, you're scrolling and you see them view your Instagram story.
Ah, the digital footprint.
They didn't die. They just completely vanished. So, yeah, welcome to the psychological warfare of modern romance.
It really is a brutal landscape, isn't it? I mean, what you're describing is an experience that has become so ubiquitous now.
It happens to everyone.
It does. And it fundamentally altered the way we communicate with each other. But it's more than just a bad experience. It represents a massive shift in human social dynamics.
Exactly. And that is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive. Welcome, everyone. We are looking at a linguistic blueprint of modern American dating, relationships, and just social life in general.
It's a fascinating subject.
It really is. Originally, this framework of vocabulary we're looking at, it was designed to teach advanced English learners, like the really high-level C2 level stuff, how to talk about romance.
But it goes so much deeper than that.
Oh, way deeper, honestly. It's not a grammar lesson at all. It is a psychological decoder ring.
A decoder ring. I like that because, the words a culture invents tell you exactly what that culture is afraid of.
Right.
It tells you what it values and, critically, how it manages vulnerability.
Which we're terrible at managing, apparently.
We really are.
Yeah.
If you want to understand the architecture of modern intimacy, you don't look at romantic comedies anymore.
No, definitely not.
You look at the slang, you look at the specific, highly calibrated terminology people use to navigate these interactions.
And whether you, the listener, are currently, braving the dating pool in New York or Los Angeles, or maybe you're completely happily partnered.
Safe on the sidelines.
Exactly. Safe on the shore, just trying to figure out why your single friends are constantly having an existential crisis. Or maybe you just want to understand the bizarre dynamics on your favorite Netflix show.
Right. This deep dive is for you.
It is. We are going to equip you with the cultural psychology behind the slang. Because, let's face it, traditional courting, knocking on a door with flowers, having a polite chat with the dad.
That is entirely dead.
It's dead. It's been replaced by this wild landscape ruled by apps, extreme emotional ambiguity, and a vocabulary that sounds, it sounds more like corporate espionage than romance.
Corporate espionage is a great way to put it, because to really grasp the mechanics of modern dating, we have to start with the infrastructure.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we start?
We have to start with the digital gateway. Almost all modern romances now begin on a piece of glowing glass.
Right. The apps.
Exactly. We are dealing with total market saturation by dating apps. Tinder, Bumble, Hinge.
They're everywhere.
They are. And they are no longer just like alternative ways to meet someone if you're too busy to go to a bar.
Like they used to be marketed.
Right. They are the primary ecosystem now. And when you gamify human connection...
the gamification is the worst part.
It really is. When you turn finding a partner into a swiping mechanism that literally mimics a slot machine, you fundamentally change human behavior.
You're just pulling the lever for a hit of dopamine.
Precisely. And that digital-first approach birthed an entirely new era of ambiguity.
Which brings us to a phrase that just saying it makes me feel exhausted.
Let me guess. The talking stage.
The talking stage, yes.
It is arguably the most culturally heavy term in our modern lexicon right now.
It really is. And it carries this immense psychological weight. Why is that?
Well, precisely because it is explicitly not an official relationship.
Right. It's the opposite of official.
That is the critical distinction. It is a prolonged, highly ambiguous period of digital communication.
Like how long are we talking here?
We're talking about weeks, sometimes months.
Months of just texting.
Texting, exchanging memes, watching each other's digital footprint. Maybe FaceTiming if you're feeling brave.
But never actually committing.
Never. The entire architectural design of the stage is to assess compatibility from a very safe distance before making any formal commitments.
I always think of the talking stage like an extended unpaid internship.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. It's like an unpaid internship where neither side wants to admit they are actually reviewing resumes.
Yeah, you're doing all the work.
Exactly. You are showing up every day. You're doing the emotional labor of a partner.
Yeah.
You're asking about their stressful meeting. You're, offering support.
You're building inside jokes.
Flirting, building inside jokes. But you have zero job security.
Because you haven't been hired.
You haven't been hired.
Yeah.
And either of you could just walk out of the building at any moment with absolutely no severance package.
That is phenomenal. It perfectly highlights the extraction of value without the promise of security.
Yes.
You are basically providing emotional intimacy on a freelance basis.
On a freelance basis.
Whoa.
Wow, that's so true. But this brings up a massive question, and I really want to push back on this whole concept.
Go for it.
Oh, why? Like, why do we do this? Why do intelligent, grown adults rely on this prolonged, agonizing digital preamble instead of just saying, hey, you seem cool. Let's get coffee on Tuesday and see if we actually like each other in 3 dimensions.
It seems logical, right?
It does. Why the 6 weeks of typing bubbles?
Well, because the talking stage acts as a highly effective emotional buffer.
A buffer.
Yeah, you have to look at the broader context of the world we live in right now. We are experiencing unprecedented information overload.
And burnout. Just general burnout.
Absolutely, emotional burnout. And the apps give us the illusion of infinite choice.
Right, there's always someone else just to swipe away.
Exactly. When you have infinite choice, making a definitive decision feels incredibly risky. Because what if the next swipe is just a little bit better?
The grass is always greener on the next profile.
Exactly. So in that environment, the ambiguity of the talking stage allows people to dip a toe in the water without assuming the intense, terrifying vulnerability of traditional dating.
But wait, is it actually protecting vulnerability, or is it just like a socially acceptable form of cowardice?
That's the million-dollar question.
I mean, if you just text someone for a month, you aren't really getting to know them, are you?
Not their true self, no.
You're getting to know their PR representative. You're getting the heavily curated, carefully edited version of their personality, where they have 10 minutes to think of a witty response to your text.
It's a bit of both, honestly. You are interacting with their avatar. But from a psychological standpoint, it works as a defense mechanism against rejection.
How so?
Well, if I just text you and things fizzle out, my ego isn't deeply bruised.
Right, you didn't really get rejected.
Exactly. I haven't looked you in the eye. I haven't paid for a dinner. I haven't devoted a Friday night to you. I've just devoted a few thumb swipes and some witty banter.
So it feels incredibly safe.
It feels completely safe.
But that safety is an illusion, because that very ambiguity, the lack of rules, the lack of defined commitment, it creates a completely lawless environment.
It really is the Wild West out there.
It's the Wild West. And in a lawless environment, people realize they can manipulate the other person with absolutely zero real-world consequences.
And that's where things get really dark.
Which transitions us perfectly into the toxic byproducts of all this digital distance. Because when you remove the physical stakes, you invite some truly toxic behavior.
The toxic tactics. The language here is really fascinating because it's so heavily reliant on metaphor to describe very modern, very specific forms of emotional harm.
Yes, the big 3 toxic tactics of modern dating. Let's get into the C2 level vocabulary of dating gone wrong. We're talking ghosting, breadcrumbing, and catfishing.
The trifecta.
The dark trifecta. Let's really dig into the mechanics of these, because they aren't just internet buzzwords. They represent a fundamental breakdown of social contracts.
They absolutely do.
Let's start with the one we opened the show with, ghosting.
Ghosting. The act of abruptly severing all communication with someone without any warning or explanation.
Just poof, gone.
You just cease to exist in their digital world. It is universally considered the coward's way out.
Okay, I want to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because while ghosting someone after 3 great dates, like in our opening scenario, is undeniably cruel.
It's awful.
It is. But is ghosting always an act of cowardice? Could it actually be a necessary boundary-setting mechanism?
Oh, in certain contexts, absolutely.
Right, because think about the sheer volume of aggressive, entitled, or downright scary responses people, especially women, receive on these apps when they try to give a polite, "I'm not interested."
The nice guy explosion.
Exactly. If society won't accept a no gracefully, hasn't the culture practically forced people to use the soft no of disappearing?
That is a crucial distinction to make. Yes, ghosting is absolutely utilized as a safety mechanism in early superficial interactions.
Right.
If you've exchanged 4 messages and the person is making you uncomfortable, disappearing is self-preservation. That's not cowardice.
So where is the line?
The term ghosting, as it carries that heavy cultural weight we're talking about, specifically refers to the evaporation of a connection after a baseline of mutual trust and emotional investment has been established.
So when there's an actual expectation of a reply.
Yes, it's when you have shared intimacy, and then the person utilizes the asynchronous nature of technology to avoid the discomfort of a difficult 2-minute conversation.
So it's the sudden death of the connection.
Exactly. And the psychological toll of that specific type of ghosting is profound. It triggers something in the brain called the Zeigarnik effect.
Oh, I know this. Wait, this is the psychological principle that says the human brain remembers uncompleted or interrupted tasks better than completed ones, right?
Spot on. The human brain demands narrative closure. We are storytelling creatures by nature.
We need the ending.
We need a beginning, a middle, and an end. So when someone ghosts you, they deny you the ending of the story.
They leave a cognitive loop wide open.
Exactly. That's why you find yourself analyzing every single word you said on that last date. Your brain is desperately trying to write the final chapter to close the loop.
That makes so much sense. It creates a state of ambiguous loss.
It does. You are grieving someone who is still alive, but inaccessible.
Wow. It leaves you haunting your own life. You actually become the ghost, pacing the hallways of your own memories, trying to figure out what went wrong.
It's maddening.
It is completely maddening. But as bad as ghosting is, I think the second toxic tactic we need to discuss is actually far more insidious.
Oh, definitely.
And that is breadcrumbing.
Breadcrumbing. The metaphor here is brilliantly descriptive.
It really paints a picture.
It evokes the image of dropping intermittent, tiny pieces of bread in a forest just to keep someone following you.
Right, like Hansel and Gretel. But instead of leading you out of the woods to safety, they were just leading you in circles forever.
Exactly. It describes the behavior of sending intermittent flirtatious messages or signals to keep someone hooked.
But with absolutely zero intent to ever commit.
Zero intent to lead them to an actual romantic destination.
It's the person who likes your Instagram story on a Tuesday, completely ignored your text for a week, and then randomly sends you a fire emoji or a vague thinking of you on a Sunday night.
Yep. Just enough to keep you on the hook.
But they never, ever attempt to nail down a time to actually see you. They just keep you orbiting them.
And if we look at the psychology here, breadcrumbing is essentially an intermittent reinforcement schedule.
Oh, wait. Like B.F. Skinner?
It's the exact same psychological mechanism used in slot machines.
B.F. Skinner's rats in the box.
Exactly. Skinner proved that if you reward a behavior like a rat pressing a lever every single time, the rat eventually gets bored.
Right. It knows the food is coming.
Exactly. If you never reward it, the rat stops pressing the lever entirely. But if you reward it unpredictably,
Sometimes a pellet drops, sometimes it doesn't.
the rat will press that lever obsessively, driven practically mad by the anticipation.
Oh, wow. So the breadcrumber is essentially turning you into the rat in the Skinner box.
That's exactly what's happening.
Because when they finally text you back after 5 days of silence, you get this massive spike of dopamine. You feel validated.
And that highlights the critical difference between ghosting and breadcrumbing.
Which is exactly what I wanted to point out. Here's where it gets really interesting. Ghosting, despite all the psychological damage it causes, is ultimately passive avoidance.
It's running away.
It is someone running away because they lack the emotional maturity to face conflict. But breadcrumbing,
That takes effort.
that is active manipulation. You have to consciously remember to send that text. You have to actively decide to like that photo just to keep your name at the very top of their notification feed.
It requires maintenance.
Right. But here's what I want to challenge you on.
Okay.
Are these behaviors actually new phenomena? I mean, humans have been terrible to each other for centuries, right?
That is definitely true.
Weren't people leading each other on in the 1800s? Didn't people string along multiple suitors in the Victorian era? Did the app era just give us catchy names for age-old human flaws?
It's a great question. And yes, vanity, manipulation, and the desire for attention, those are fundamental human flaws that predate the internet by millennia. But what's fascinating here is what the technology actually did. It radically altered the scale and the social cost.
Oh, the scale.
Think about it. In the 1800s, if you actively led someone on, there was a physical and social limit to how many people you could manipulate in your village.
Right, you only knew so many people.
And more importantly, you eventually had to see them at the market or at church. Their family knew your family. There was a tangible social consequence for bad behavior.
You couldn't just vanish into the ether.
Exactly. The screen removes immediate emotional consequence. Today, breadcrumbing highlights a deeply modern, almost pathological desire for constant validation without the cost of any actual emotional investment.
Because of the apps, you can sit in your couch and breadcrumb 10 different people simultaneously.
Exactly. You harvest the ego boost when they reply, that little hit of, I am desired, and you never have to actually care about the human being on the other end of the phone.
You're just harvesting dopamine.
The technology weaponized the human flaw by making it frictionless and infinitely scalable.
That is terrifying. We have basically optimized emotional manipulation for efficiency.
We really have.
And speaking of weaponized technology, that brings us to the third titan of toxic dating: catfishing.
Catfishing. It's a phenomenon so culturally prevalent, it spawned its own long-running MTV reality show.
Which essentially embedded the term into the global vocabulary, right?
Really did.
So catfishing is the act of creating an entirely fictitious online persona for deception, almost always to lure someone into an emotional or romantic relationship.
A total fabrication.
Yeah. You think you are talking to a 28-year-old architect from Miami who sends you pictures of their dog and their glamorous life.
You're texting for months.
Months. You form this deep, profound emotional bond, you share your secrets, and then the house of cards collapses, and you realize you've been pouring your heart out to a 55-year-old accountant in Ohio using stolen photos from a random influencer's page.
It is the ultimate manifestation of digital ambiguity taken to its logical, fraudulent extreme.
It's so crazy.
But what's truly fascinating here isn't just the deception of the catfish. It's the psychology of the victim.
See, this is what always baffles me. When you watch those shows or hear those stories, there are almost always massive, glaring red flags.
Always.
The person can never FaceTime because their camera is broken.
For 6 months.
Right. Or they always have some dramatic, elaborate excuse for why they can't meet up at the last second. Why do intelligent, rational people ignore the obvious signs that they're being lied to?
Because catfishing preys on two incredibly powerful psychological forces. The first is the innate human desire to believe that we are special. The catfish constructs a narrative specifically tailored to the victim's deepest insecurities and desires.
So they figure out what you want to hear.
Exactly. They present themselves as the perfect partner who magically understands the victim better than anyone else in the real world ever has.
They sell a customized fantasy.
A completely customized fantasy. And the second force is the sunk cost fallacy.
The idea that you've invested too much time and energy to turn back now.
Precisely. If you have spent 6 months texting this person every single day, pouring your emotional energy into this connection, your brain desperately wants the connection to be real.
Because the alternative is just too painful.
Acknowledging that the person is a fake means acknowledging that you wasted 6 months of your life. It means your emotional intimacy was a lie and that you were foolish enough to be duped.
Nobody wants to feel foolish.
Nobody. So the brain actively ignores the red flags to protect the ego from the devastating reality of the deception. It's a shared delusion, really.
That makes so much sense.
The catfish wants to pretend to be someone else, and the victim wants to pretend the fairy tale is real.
And while the MTV-style catfish is the extreme, we see micro-catfishing constantly, don't we?
Constantly.
Lying about height, age, income.
Using photos that are 10 years old or heavily filtered.
It's all part of the same spectrum, just leveraging digital distance to present an optimized, fictionalized version of the self.
Exactly.
So, okay, let's say you manage to survive this digital gauntlet.
It's a miracle, but okay.
Right. You dodge the ghosts, you refuse to starve on the breadcrumbs, and you verify that the person you're talking to actually exists in the physical world. Eventually you hit a wall.
You do.
People get exhausted by the prison of digital ambiguity. The only way to actually progress the relationship is to step out from behind the screen, meet in person, and force the issue.
Which brings us to the next massive shift in our linguistic blueprint, breaking the digital barrier and the intense, terrifying demand for clarity.
The moment of truth. Let's say you finally meet up. You sit down across from them at the coffee shop, and miraculously, it is wonderful. The language we use to describe this is so specific. Hitting it off.
Hitting it off. It is the ultimate antidote to the anxiety of the talking stage.
It really is.
It describes the immediate, kinetic, real-world chemistry that cannot be faked over a text message.
It's that feeling when the conversation isn't a struggle.
Yeah.
You aren't forcing it. You're both reaching for the same joke at the exact same time.
The hours just melt away.
Mirror neurons are firing. Your body language syncs up. It's an immense relief.
It is a relief, but it also initiates a countdown clock.
Oh, a countdown clock. I like that.
Because if you hit it off, and you keep hitting it off week after week, you inevitably arrive at the most crucial, dreaded milestone in the modern American social landscape.
The DTR conversation.
Define the relationship.
3 little letters that strike absolute paralyzing terror into the hearts of 20-somethings everywhere. DTR.
We really need to unpack why this specific conversation is viewed with such intense dread. I mean, why is asking for clarity treated like a root canal?
It really is. I always think of the DTR conversation like this.
Yeah.
Imagine you are at an incredible house party.
Okay, I'm there.
For months, you've been hanging out in this dim, romantic, moody lighting. The talking stage is like that party. Everything is a little blurry, the music is loud, everyone is just vibing, you're having a few drinks, it's comfortable.
Low stakes.
Exactly. But initiating the DTR conversation is like suddenly striding over to the wall and flicking the switch for the bright, buzzing industrial fluorescent lights at 3 a.m.
Oh, that ruins the ambiance immediately.
It completely shatters it. The harsh lights come on, you have to sober up, look at the mess of empty cups on the floor, look the other person directly in the eye, and ask the hard, uncomfortable question.
What are we?
Are we exclusive? Or are we just having fun? What are we doing here? You have to look at the reality of the situation without the romantic blur.
That analogy perfectly captures the systemic friction of modern dating.
Because nobody wants the lights on.
Nobody wants the lights on. The reason the DTR is considered the dreaded conversation is because American dating culture, enabled by the apps, leans so incredibly heavily into casual, no-strings-attached beginnings.
Right.
The highest cultural premium is placed on being chill.
Oh, you have to be chill.
Never showing too much effort, never being too demanding, always keeping your options open.
Caring less is cool. The person who cares less wins.
Exactly. So when you demand clarity, you are fundamentally shattering the comfortable illusion of the talking stage.
Yeah.
You are violating the cultural rule of remaining chill.
You're forcing an issue.
You are forcing a binary outcome in a culture that absolutely despises binary outcomes.
We're forcing their hand.
You are forcing them to step up and commit or step away and lose you entirely. The DTR requires a level of raw vulnerability that the digital era has actively trained us to avoid.
It's terrifying.
It is. You have to admit out loud to another human being's face, I care about you, I am invested in this, and I want you to only date me.
And if they don't feel the same way?
You can't unsend that conversation.
No, you can't retreat back into the dim lighting of the house party. The lights are on. And you can never, ever pretend they aren't on again.
And this is where the linguistic landscape undergoes a massive tectonic shift. This is the turning point in our blueprint.
This is what absolutely fascinated me when looking at these terms. Before the DTR conversation, the vocabulary is light, vague, digital, and transient.
Talking, vibing, ghosting, swiping.
Right. It all implies a complete lack of permanence. But once you make a decision in that brightly lit room, the language becomes extreme.
The middle ground vanishes completely.
It does. If you decide to commit, the slang becomes incredibly heavy, traditional, and permanent. And if things go wrong, the language becomes violently destructive.
We enter the extremes of commitment and collapse. Let's look at the language of going all in first, the positive side of the binary.
Right. When people decide to leap into commitment, we see terms like smitten, settling down, tying the knot, and taking the plunge. These aren't casual words at all. Let's start with smitten.
Smitten is a beautiful older word, but it carries a very specific psychological weight. To be smitten means to be overwhelmingly infatuated, to be deeply in love.
But the root of the word is interesting, isn't it?
It is. It's related to smite. It's entirely passive. It implies that love is a force that has physically struck you down.
Like you've been hit by lightning. You didn't choose to be smitten. The universe smote you with love.
Exactly. It removes the calculated algorithmic logic of the swiping apps entirely.
The apps are active. You swipe, you choose. Being smitten is passive. You surrender.
You surrender to it. And when someone is truly smitten, it frequently acts as the catalyst for a massive behavioral and lifestyle shift. Which brings us to the concept of settling down.
Ah, settling down. It is such a cornerstone of the American life narrative. It implies leaving a wild, single, transient, or chaotic life for domestic stability.
Usually buying a house, committing to one long-term partner, maybe having kids.
It's the transition from exploration to cultivation.
Right.
Think about the archetype of the 20-something backpacker.
The classic example.
Right. Someone who spent a decade partying, hopping from hostel to hostel across Europe and Asia, living out of a single bag, terrified of being tied down to one city or one person.
And then
they hit their early 30s, they get smitten, and suddenly they're ready to settle down. The wild ride is over, they want a mortgage, a predictable routine, and a golden retriever.
it's the grounding of the individual. But the ultimate culmination of settling down, culturally speaking, is marriage. And the vocabulary we use for marriage is intensely symbolic.
It really is.
We have tying the knot, which is very traditional. It invokes old Celtic or pagan unity ceremonies where a couple's hands were literally bound together with rope or ribbon to symbolize two lives becoming inextricably linked.
It implies a bond that is intentionally difficult to unravel.
Exactly. But the second idiom for marriage is the one I find most revealing, taking the plunge.
Taking the plunge. Think about a couple who has been together for years and they were finally taking the plunge to getting married in Hawaii or wherever. I have to ask you, why do Americans use a phrase that literally evokes the image of jumping off a deadly, jagged cliff into a dark, freezing ocean to describe a joyful wedding?
It's a brilliant question, and it reveals the deep underlying modern anxiety surrounding commitment.
Because it sounds terrifying.
It does.
Yeah.
If we connect this back to everything we discussed about the talking stage and the apps, modern dating is entirely built on preserving optionality, keeping doors open.
Always having a backup plan.
Exactly. Taking the plunge acknowledges the inherent, terrifying, existential risk of finally letting go of all other options.
You are standing on the precipice of your single life.
Exactly. You are looking over the edge. Behind you is the safety of endless choices, of swiping, of the talking stage. But to progress, you have to jump into the unknown of a permanent legal, financial, and emotional bond.
You are giving up your autonomy.
It's a massive leap of faith.
It really is. Settling down implies a loss of kinetic freedom. You stop moving. But taking the plunge implies a free fall.
And it is the ultimate, absolute antidote to the ambiguity of the talking stage. You cannot partially take a plunge.
No, you can't.
You cannot dip a toe in the water when you are falling off a cliff. You are either standing safely on the edge or you are completely submerged in the water. It is total commitment.
That is profound. You are either in the air or you're on the rocks. But of course, not every jump ends well.
Unfortunately not.
Sometimes you take the plunge, you hit the water, and the water is full of sharks. Or you realize you jumped with the wrong person entirely. Which brings us to the other extreme. The violently destructive language of collapse.
The negative binary. When a committed relationship begins to fail, the language we use abandons the digital flippancy of ghosting and becomes intensely warning-oriented and catastrophic.
We start dealing with red flags and relationships on the rocks.
Red flags. This is a term that has completely colonized the internet over the last 5 years.
Oh, everything is a red flag now. Chewing too loud is a red flag on TikTok.
Right, it's overused. But fundamentally, a red flag is a clear, undeniable indicator of a deep character flaw or a fundamental incompatibility that predicts future misery.
It's the warning sign on the racetrack telling you that there is danger ahead and you need to stop the car immediately before you crash.
Precisely.
One of the most universally agreed upon cultural red flags is how a person treats service workers.
Oh, the waiter test.
The classic example. You are on a date, the person is incredibly charming, funny, engaging, and then they snap their fingers at the waiter and speak to them with utter disdain. Why is that specific behavior considered the ultimate deal-breaking red flag?
Because it reveals a terrifying truth about power dynamics and empathy.
How so?
When someone is on a date with you, they are actively trying to court you. They are wearing their absolute best mask. They are incentivized to be charming because they want something from you.
Right, they're putting on a performance for my benefit.
But the waiter has no power over them, and the waiter is socially and professionally obligated to be polite back, no matter how they are treated.
Because it's their job.
Right. So the interaction with the waiter strips away the performative charm and reveals the person's baseline level of empathy, entitlement, and respect for human dignity.
That's chilling.
If they will casually demean a stranger serving them food because they perceive that stranger as beneath them, it is a massive waving red flag telling you exactly how they will treat you the moment you disagree with them.
Or the moment the infatuation wears off and you are no longer a shiny new prize.
Exactly.
It is a preview of coming attractions. It shows you who they are when the mask slips. But the tragedy of human connection is that people ignore these red flags all the time.
All the time.
The physical chemistry is too good, or the sunk cost fallacy kicks in, or they are just profoundly terrified of being alone again. So they drive their car right past the warning signs, hoping the track is clear.
And if you ignore the red flags, you will inevitably find your relationship on the rocks.
On the rocks.
Yeah.
This is such a visceral, painful idiom. To say a relationship is on the rocks means it is experiencing severe foundational difficulties and is on the absolute verge of total collapse.
It is a nautical metaphor and a terrifying one if you really visualize it.
Right. Paint the picture for us.
Imagine a massive, beautifully constructed wooden vessel. This ship represents the time, the money, the deep emotional investment, the shared history of a long-term relationship.
It took years to build.
Years. But because the captain ignored the red warning flags regarding the shallow waters, that massive, heavy ship is now violently scraping against jagged, hidden stones beneath the surface.
The hull is breaching. The wood is splintering.
The water is rushing in. It captures the agonizing reality of a failing long-term relationship. It's rarely a sudden explosion. It is the slow, grinding, terrifying destruction of something monumental.
You are stuck on a sinking ship listening to it tear itself apart.
Exactly.
It's not a gentle fading out like the end of a talking stage. It's a disaster. Which leads us into our final section of this deep dive, endings, and the people left standing in the wreckage with you.
The aftermath.
When that ship inevitably hits the rocks and goes down to the bottom of the ocean, how does modern culture describe the aftermath? And more importantly, who is holding your hand when you finally swim back to shore?
You need a safety net, and that is your platonic circle. But first, let's look at the absolute finality of these endings. We have two incredibly potent terms: irreconcilable differences and burning bridges.
Irreconcilable differences is a fascinating phrase because it originated as strict legal jargon.
Yes, in the family court system.
In the United States, it is the most common grounds for a no-fault divorce. It legally signifies that the disagreements between the spouses are so profound, so deeply rooted in their core values, that they absolutely cannot be resolved by therapy, time, or compromise. The marriage is legally unfixable.
But what's truly interesting from a sociological standpoint is how that strict clinical legal term has bled into everyday casual conversation.
It really has.
You will hear someone say they broke up with a boyfriend of 6 months due to irreconcilable differences.
Why do we use a lawyer's term to describe a breakup?
Because it provides a clean, clinical, almost sterile way to describe a very messy emotional failure.
Oh, that makes sense. Breakups are messy.
Breakups are humiliating. They are full of screaming, crying, and ugly accusations. By using the phrase irreconcilable differences, you elevate the breakup. You remove the blame.
It wasn't my fault. It wasn't your fault.
Exactly. It wasn't that I was too needy or that you were unfaithful. It was just a structural incompatibility. It sanitizes the wreckage.
It definitely sounds a lot more dignified than saying, we screamed at each other in the driveway about whose turn it was to load the dishwasher until we literally couldn't take the sight of each other anymore.
It's PR for a broken heart.
PR for a broken heart. Exactly. It's narrative control. But our second term doesn't sanitize anything. It revels in the destruction.
Burning bridges.
Burning bridges. This is when a breakup or an exit is so intensely nasty, so fueled by rage, that the explicit goal is to destroy the connection so permanently that you could never, ever go back.
It is the scorched earth policy of social dynamics.
Think about the physical act of burning a bridge. You are severing the only path between two pieces of land, ensuring that communication and travel are physically impossible moving forward.
A great example of this is the person who decides to quit their toxic job and dump their manipulative partner on the exact same afternoon.
Oh, a double bridge burn.
Right. And they do it by sending a blistering, insult-laden email to the boss and then throwing the partner's clothes out the window onto the lawn. You aren't just walking away, you are throwing a stick of dynamite over your shoulder as you leave.
You are intentionally ensuring that there is no path of retreat. You can never ask that boss for a reference, and you can never, in a moment of weakness, text that ex at 2 a.m.
The bridge is literal ash.
It's a terrifying, but honestly sometimes incredibly liberating act of finality.
It is.
And when you are standing on your side of the river, smelling the smoke, staring at the burning bridge, who is standing next to you?
Who helps you rebuild?
Your friends, the platonic safety net. And this is where the deep dive into American social dynamics really comes full circle, connecting the beginning of our journey to the end.
Because romantic slang and platonic slang are completely structurally interconnected. You cannot navigate one without the other. Our linguistic blueprint highlights 3 key terms that govern how Americans socialize around romance: the wingman, the third wheel, and the concept of keeping at arm's length. Let's start with the hero of the entire social ecosystem, the wingman, or wingwoman.
The wingman is the ultimate social facilitator. This is a friend who actively, intentionally supports and facilitates your romantic pursuits. They are the person who hypes you up, makes you look confident, and crucially, runs social interference.
The military origin of the term is perfect, isn't it?
It really is. The wingman flies beside the lead pilot to protect them from enemy fire. In a bar setting, the enemy fires the awkwardness of approaching a stranger.
Right.
The wingman will go talk to the target's completely boring friend for an hour, sacrificing their own night, just so you can have an uninterrupted one-on-one conversation with the person you actually want to talk to.
And if we connect this back to the very beginning of our deep dive, a good wingman is the human antidote to the dating apps.
Well, that's a great point.
The apps isolate us. They put us in silos. You need a wingman to help you break out of the digital cycle of ghosting and breadcrumbing. They provide the social proof and the courage you need to bypass the talking stage entirely and actually approach a human being in the physical world.
They are the human algorithm.
The human algorithm. I love that.
But there is a massive inherent risk to being a wingman. Because if you do your job too well and your friend actually succeeds, they end up in a committed relationship.
And suddenly, your role changes.
You find yourself transforming from the heroic wingman into the saddest figure in the American social landscape. The third wheel.
The dreaded third wheel. This phrase describes the profoundly awkward, superfluous single person tagging along with an established romantic couple.
I think we all relate deeply to the sheer existential awkwardness of being the third wheel.
It's the worst feeling.
The mechanics of the metaphor are flawless. Think about a bicycle. 2 wheels provide perfect balance. 2 wheels move forward smoothly, in tandem. A third wheel attached to a bicycle serves absolutely no structural or functional purpose.
None at all.
It just awkwardly spins on the side, ungrounded, getting in the way of the dynamic.
You are structurally unnecessary.
Yes, you're sitting in the cramped booth at the restaurant while the couple intimately feeds each other fries and talks about their shared inside jokes, and you're just staring at your phone, feeling completely invisible, but also painfully hypervisible.
It highlights a very specific, acute type of social isolation. You are physically present in the room, but you are emotionally and structurally excluded from the core dynamic.
Which brings us to the final concept of our sociological blueprint. How do we manage that exclusion? How do we manage boundaries?
That is encapsulated by the phrase, keeping at arm's length.
Keeping at arm's length means maintaining a safe emotional distance from someone while remaining totally cordial and polite. The classic example is the nice, but perhaps very gossipy or intrusive new coworker.
We all know one.
You want to be polite, you want to have a pleasant working environment, but you absolutely do not want to be their confidant or best friend.
This phrase is incredibly revealing about the paradox of American culture. Globally, Americans are famous for being incredibly friendly. We smile at strangers on the street. We strike up small talk in the grocery store line. We are loud and outgoing.
We act like everyone is our friend.
We do. But this phrase, keeping at arm's length, reveals that beneath that outgoing, friendly exterior, American social dynamics are actually governed by very strict, unwritten, deeply entrenched spatial rules.
I always picture keeping someone at arm's length like this. Imagine your internal emotional life is a high-rise corporate building.
Okay.
You greet this person warmly, in the beautiful, sunny, glass-walled lobby. You offer them a cup of coffee. You ask them how their weekend was. You laugh at their jokes. But you absolutely refuse to give them the electronic security badge required to scan into the elevators and access the upper floors.
The upper floors are off limits.
The upper floors are where your actual life, your deep fears, your real opinions, and your vulnerabilities are securely kept. They're permanently stationed in the lobby.
That is a brilliant visualization. You are engaging with them, but you are controlling the architecture of the intimacy. It shows how highly sophisticated the social dance really is.
Because you aren't burning a bridge with them.
Exactly, because they are perfectly nice and you might need to work with them.
Yeah.
But you also aren't letting them take the plunge with you. You are constantly actively managing the exact psychological distance between you.
So we have covered an immense amount of ground today. What an incredible, slightly terrifying journey.
It's been a ride.
We started in the murky, digital ambiguity of the talking stage, dodging ghosts and starving on breadcrumbs in a landscape designed to prevent vulnerability. We navigated the sheer blinding terror of turning the fluorescent lights on during the DTR conversation.
The worst conversation.
We explored the extreme binaries that follow clarity, either taking the ultimate plunge into lifelong commitment or watching the massive ship of a relationship crash onto the rocks of irreconcilable differences, ultimately burning the bridge to ash.
And finally, we looked at how our platonic safety nets, our wingmen, help us survive the wreckage.
As long as we don't become the third wheel.
It is a chaotic, exhausting cycle. But when you look at it all laid out like this, there is a profound underlying logic to it. Every single piece of slang we discussed today is ultimately a tool.
A psychological tool.
Yes. These words are psychological mechanisms designed to help people navigate the intense, constant friction between the deep human desire for profound connection and the equally deep, paralyzing human terror of being vulnerable to another person.
And that is the true takeaway of this deep dive.
Yeah.
The next time you watch an American rom-com, or you find yourself re-downloading a dating app, or you're just people watching at a coffee shop and listening to the couple next to you argue,
Yeah.
you don't just hear the casual words anymore.
You aren't just looking at the surface.
You now possess the psychological decoder ring for the entire culture. You understand the hidden architecture of how these relationships are built, how the distance is managed, and how they are ultimately destroyed.
But before we sign off, I think this raises an important, slightly uncomfortable question, a lingering thought that I want to leave our listeners to ponder.
Oh, let's hear.
We've spent this entire time exploring how we now have these highly specific, incredibly catchy, medically tinged labels for every single microbehavior in human interaction. We label a minor annoyance a red flag. We call someone who's just hesitant or busy a breadcrumber. We diagnose every single interaction with a buzzword.
Right. We have categorized the entire spectrum of human behavior. We have a word for everything.
But here is the question. Does this highly efficient, hyper-categorized language actually make us quicker to discard people?
Oh, wow.
By categorizing everyone into these neat, dismissive little slang terms, are we losing the patience required to work through the messy, unlabeled, frustrating reality of human connection?
That's a heavy thought.
Are we using these clever words as shields to protect ourselves from the hard, uncomfortable work of actually getting to know a flawed, complex human being? If I can just label you a red flag, I don't have to try to understand you. I can just swipe left and move on to the next.
That's going to keep me up at night.
Yeah.
Are we weaponizing our vocabulary to avoid vulnerability entirely? We think we're being emotionally intelligent by using all these terms, but maybe we are just building thicker walls. That is a brilliant, provocative question for you, our listeners, to mull over on your own the next time you find yourself wanting to ghost someone.
Good luck out there.
Well, that wraps up today's deep dive into the psychological landscape of modern romance. Thank you so much for joining us and braving the muddy, shark-infested waters of the digital dating era. Make sure you stick around for our next deep dive, where we are going to pivot from the chaotic world of intimacy into the equally chaotic, slightly soul-crushing world of American corporate jargon.
Oh, that's going to be a fun one.
We're going to figure out what it actually means to circle back, how to synergize, and how to survive the corporate office without completely losing your mind.
You definitely won't want to miss that one. The vocabulary of the boardroom is just as ruthless as the vocabulary of the bedroom.
Until then, just remember, no matter how many slang words you memorize or how many psychological rules you try to apply to your relationships, the streets of the city are going to keep redrawing themselves. The map is always going to be a little bit useless when it comes to the human heart. And maybe, just maybe, navigating the unknown is the whole point of the adventure. Catch you next time.